afternoon, Raju.
Hi, good afternoon, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Anytime.
I think the last time we talked, you were probably standing in a room somewhere on a tropical island. I was next to you. We were training something around leadership, or maybe it was disc profile, something like that. Do you remember when that was? I think it was.
Wow, that's a few years ago. Quite a few years ago, actually. Maybe 6 years ago or something like that. 6, 7 years ago. But yeah, I think it was the overall topic was leadership, and DISC was one of the components that we had put in for the leadership program. Obviously, because we want leaders to understand themselves, their styles, and the people that they're dealing with. So it just makes sense.
Well, let's start off, I think, by just introducing you to the audience and letting them
Okay,
get to know you a little bit. So, if you want to just tell us a little bit about EHP and a little bit about your background.
sure. My name is Raju, Raju. Born in India. I've lived in Hong Kong for next month will be 60 years, 60. So I know I look young, but I'm 64. Uh, I deliver training programs in English and Cantonese because I grew up in Hong Kong, so I speak the language fluently. I used to work for Dale Carnegie, and before that, I was in the hospitality industry. So I was working for the Hiltons until after Dale Carnegie, I decided to open up my own, which was in 1995. And ever since, we've been running our own operation, which is called EHP, Enhancing Human Potential. What we want to do is we want to help people grow and develop. So it doesn't matter which industry they're in. It doesn't matter whether they want the skills for a professional career, whether they want it for their personal life, because we do deal with people all the time. And the biggest challenge, I've also written a book called The P Factor, and the P stands for people, because I truly, truly, truly believe that people are the most complicated subject on earth. You can learn rocket science because you have, the programming and the rules behind it. People will continuously confuse you. You could have a meeting with someone in the morning, and then in the afternoon, it's the same person, and yet it's not the same person. So if you get my drift. So I always find that people are the most complicated subject. So our training is all about dealing with people in every context, in
People
a
are the
nutshell.
variable.
Yeah. Biggest
So, like
variable.
when you started the company, you said the vision for this is to help people in some particular way. Was the early training that you were doing focused on specific topics, or was it general leadership always since the founding?
Well, I think because of my background with Dale Carnegie, that the first topic that comes to mind is communication and interpersonal skills. So that was kind of the foundation. My strength has always been selling skills. So basically, in the beginning, we focused on communication and interpersonal skills and selling skills. Those two are the ones that we kicked off with. And I had a lot of support from my existing clients at that time. So it kind of grew from there. So we went into literally every topic that covers dealing with people. So you're talking about managing conflicts. You're talking about change management. You're talking about the bigger topic of leadership, because leadership is all about driving results through people. So that's why we got into that. And now we have a whole range of, but basically, in a nutshell, we don't have standard standalone programs. What we do is we customize. So it really depends on the corporates or the individual. What are they looking for? And based on what they're looking for, we can actually put the program together to address their key objectives, that they're trying to achieve.
Now I understand, but you're working across many cultures, right? So you said you're
Yeah.
based in Hong Kong, but I've heard you've also doing work in India and Dubai as well.
Yes, we're expanding into a lot of new places right now. We have been doing training in India for a while, all over Southeast Asia, obviously, because clients based in Hong Kong do tend to send us out to different locations to do training. I just came back from a training for a logistics company talking about sales training, but they held their sales conference in Vietnam. So I was in Ho Chi Minh City last week, actually 2 weeks ago. But we've also been invited by the government of the Saint Martin Caribbean Islands. We've been invited by them to come and do a lot of customer service training because they want to promote tourism for the islands. You know, the whole island is dependent on tourism. So hospitality, retail, the Taxi Driver Association. We're going to be doing training for the Taxi Driver Associations, which is fantastic because they want to promote good service, positive energy everywhere. So that's what we're going
Well,
to help them with.
so out in how you commanded the room, how you took control of the audience, but it was the most engaging type of training that I've ever seen, to be honest. And I think
Thank
there's
you.
a certain formula where you say, maybe it's a certain percentage is like theory, and
Yeah,
the rest of it is really about putting it to practice immediately. And I
right.
think that was a great lesson to take away for the
Wow.
trainings that I would think about doing when I was
Thank you.
heading up learning and development at Six Senses. This is back in Bangkok when I was living there.
Right.
It was the
Right.
same thing. You have to kind of make it an experience.
Yes.
The training
Yes.
needs to be not just a lecture in front of a room.
Can
Those university classes that people remember that you just sat there for 2 hours falling asleep. It's got to be something that you have workshops or you have little breakouts or you have
Yeah.
ways to engage people. And I think
Yeah.
it's not just training. It's really anytime you're working with someone that you should try to make an experience the customer never forgets. So I'm assuming
Exactly.
that from your point of view, when you're going into that room, whether it's online or it's in a classroom, you're providing an experience, and then that will seed into their memory, and
Yeah.
they'll remember
Yeah.
the lesson so much more. I think that's
Yes.
that's what I've always
Uh,
remembered.
people tend to remember things that they actually tried rather than something they just heard. Um, they heard it, it sounds great, but nah, that's not for me. And that happens a lot. I look at videos of some stuff sometimes and I go like, sounds interesting. Yeah, but that's not for me. And I kind of walk away. But and that's why if you notice in our classrooms, one of my styles is I will give a little bit of theory because that's something you have to. You're sharing some knowledge with them. So you impart knowledge, you impart concepts to them. But I then make sure that I call out people because it's a training program. So I'll say, hey, Sean, so how do you feel about that? What do you think about this? And the moment people are engaged and they are able to give you their I agree or I don't agree or I'm not so sure, it's fine. Whatever answer they give you, they don't all have to agree with you. I mean, you're not like the perfect person giving, the total advice. But that interaction that takes place, that engagement, that's where the learning actually takes place. And we do that in many different formats. We do group discussions, table discussions. We do discussions with the class in a plenary. We also do role plays, case studies, so that they actually get a chance to convert all the concepts into reality. To their reality, which is the key. It's not about just reality in general, but it's my reality. These are the customers I face, and these are what my customers say. So this actually helps. And that's why before any training, wherever possible, we usually ask participants to give us some, either from the management or from the participants themselves, a random number of participants. Give us some specific cases. You've had challenging customers. Tell us what they did, what they said, so that we can use them back in the training program to engage them even more.
It's like the power of role playing.
Definitely. Very
Well,
definitely, it's critical. Yeah.
there's been like especially during COVID, there's been this move to provide that to corporates, and I know you've worked across many countries and some of the top companies, top brands. I think everyone would know,
Yeah.
and you've kind of adjusted and helped them with their training strategies and how they go through their learning and development.
Yeah.
But they're in this world of digital now, and people kind of want instant access. And we know we've said, if you have an experience, you're more likely to adapt and do something because of
Very
that
true.
emotional connection to the experience. It'll trigger a more behavioral change. But then you have people that are out there. Maybe they're working in a corporate environment, and they may have their training once a quarter, or they may have their
Yeah.
online learning. I
Yeah.
think there is still the need for people to take on their own personal development. In this increasingly digital world, we
Yeah.
see that training has become more like an instant gratification thing, or they
It
might,
is.
people are expecting to have it immediately available, which I think is good. In some case, they'll get some knowledge. I
Yeah.
think having those moments where you have a big experience and you step into a room and you connect with
Yeah.
humans around you, and you have this greater emotional kind of connection,
Connection. Yeah.
you'll remember more of those things.
True.
I think there's
True.
there's definitely a need for that kind of experience where you put the phone away and you walk
Yeah.
into a room and
True.
you have a transformation, right? You were this person before you went to this training, and you're this person afterwards. And we're saying how you might have people that are in the corporate world. They may be, experiencing training once a quarter or whatever. I think they have to take it upon themselves to look for opportunities to skill up
Yeah.
themselves.
Very much. Here's my thoughts on it. During COVID, obviously, with all the restrictions, none of the clients could put together any training programs because face to face was not allowed. You can't have so many people in a group. You can't even have one on one meetings because of the restrictions. So at that time, some of my regular clients actually called me and said, we still want to do training. We don't want to just ignore the people and say, oh, there's nothing happening. We want to be able to give them something. So at that time, Zoom and Teams, all these became very popular. So we actually put together our curriculums to deliver on Zoom. And over about a year and 3 months, 15 months roughly, we kind of almost perfected the delivery in that sense. I mean, again, perfect does not mean it's perfect, right? It's just as close to it as possible. We still had people engage. We still had question and answers. We still had role plays. Even though it was on Zoom, we put them into separate rooms, private rooms, breakout areas, breakout rooms, where they could have their group discussion, come back into the main hall, and then share their views from their group. So we put together some of those. Building on that, what I did was I also had, I think, about 8 programs that were self-learning videos that were created on those topics. So like selling skills, we call it cash methodology. We had that put together as self-learning modules. It has basically 4 parts to it. There's the introduction, there's session 1, session 2, session 3, session 4. So what we suggested is if clients are purchasing those for self-learning modules for their participants, since they can't do any face-to-face. And after a while, people got tired of doing it on Zoom as well. They want to do it on their own time. There's no fixed, rigid schedule. Basically, what happens is you watch the introduction video, and then the video actually guides you to listen to session 1, do the activities. We give them time to think about certain things, pause the video, come back, and continue listening. After session 1, you're not supposed to go and watch all 4 videos together. You're supposed to space it out one session per week, so that during the week, whatever you learned in session 1, you got to go and apply it, so that you can come back and either reconnect with the trainer and say, I tried it, it didn't work, because we actually give them access to connect with us. But otherwise, you go on to session 2 if you've completed session 1. And so it was a guided formula for them to go through the process of the whole video. So we're trying to do that. And then recently, as you know, we're doing a lot of podcasts. We're doing a lot of sharing of video posts, purely to give back to society, give back to people in terms of knowledge.
The leadership lessons that you've learned on your side, have you picked up
Uh,
things from your students?
One of the key things is practice what I preach. So I can't be, and I've seen a lot of leaders do that. They give all the real good advice. And then when it comes to them, they kind of lose it. I tell people, okay, when you're listening to people, don't interrupt. even though he's saying something that you don't agree with, don't interrupt and challenge it immediately. But hey, I'm human. So I can't really excuse the fact that I'm going to be nobody's perfect. I truly believe nobody's perfect, which means, yeah, I've stumbled those same mistakes. I've had, the same challenges where you get emotional and you kind of lash out at people and you kind of go, oops, that's not what I teach people. So be a good listener, keep an open mind. One of the things with listening that we keep repeating in our classes is people usually listen to reply, which is not right. You need to listen to understand.
Yes, absolutely.
Unfortunately, because we're not listening to understand, we're listening to reply. So I'm kind of waiting to pounce on any keyword that you have. The moment you say that, I go, but Sean, and I jump into a tirade of what my feelings are. As a leader, we really need to be in control of that emotion and say, okay, let me get it all in. Let me understand why, because a lot of people will tell you what they're feeling. They may not tell you the real reasons behind it, the why they're feeling it. And that's the important part to get out.
So what are the keys for like the leaders that, they need to keep in mind when they're trying to develop their teams? You can send people to training. You can have one-on-one coaching as a man. You can have them do self-learning, guided learning. What's your advice when you have these very large teams of corporate individuals that you work with? There's only one Raju that goes around. So how do you elevate? How do you expand your message so that
Yeah.
it filters down through all of the people that you've actually touched?
One of the things that we can do, and we can only do so much, is we can advise corporate leaders like yourself to say, listen, we can do the training. And I'm happy to come every 3 months, every 6 months, every year to come and deliver programs. I'm making money out of it. It's a passion that I have, but at the same time, I'm making money. I don't mind coming back. I mean, you call me every month. I don't mind coming back. But that's not the way to sustain the learning environment. So what you really want to do, any organization, what they need to do is they need to have a system in place where there is internal follow-up taking place all the time. So for example, in a nutshell, we do a sales training program. But before we do the sales training program, my advice to the clients is pull out your 8 or 10 or 12 sales managers and give them to me for one day because we need to give them sales coaching. Otherwise, what's going to happen? People will attend a 2-day, 3-day sales program, very excited. They really learned a lot. They had fun. They go out, and somehow the skill didn't work for them. They're not going to be, even though we offer them, I ask them to connect to my Instagram. I ask them to connect to my LinkedIn, and I tell them, feel free to connect with me. Just ask me questions. I guess, people ask, he's a consultant, he's external, I don't want to bother him. So they don't reach out to me all the time. There are a few who do, but not all. They need someone internally who they can go back to. And like Sean is their boss, they need to go back to Sean and say, hey, listen, Raju taught us this skill about asking this question. I tried it. It didn't work. So Sean should be able to say, hold on, your customer, what style was he? Was he a D or a I or a S? And based on that, your internal coaching is going to help that person to consolidate what he learned and implement it. Because the worst thing people do is they have training, they enjoy the training, but they're not able to implement it, unfortunately. Not always. There are people who are anxious to make it work and they will reach out to me and they'll ask questions and they'll give me a scenario. I had this client. This is what he said. This is what I said. So that goes, which is a good thing. Fortunately, out of 20 people in class, maybe one or two will reach out. The 18 kind of fall through the cracks. So that internal follow-up system, I don't want to call it a measurement system, and it's not a checking system, but it is a reinforcement method internally for companies to ensure the money they spent on the training is not a cost, but an actual investment.
Yes.
So that would be key.
It makes me think of something. I was discussing this with an entrepreneur today. So I'm in a group that has a lot of entrepreneurs and people that are starting maybe a new division or new business. And
Right?
there's a lot of talk about the idea of the speed of implementation. Right? So a lot of people will learn things, they'll have knowledge, they'll actually, we call them course junkies. They go
Yeah.
around, they'll
Yeah.
take every single course they can possibly imagine, but never ever implement anything.
They
So I think
can't.
it's all
Yeah.
about, the moment you could learn something, try to implement it right away. And then it tends to
Exactly.
stick in the behavioral change, and it's like a
Exactly.
mindset shift. I think
Exactly.
that's probably it's having the right leader, of course, that's kind of pushing you, challenging you, making sure that you're taking motions and actions that are getting you to the destination you need to be, but also
Yeah.
inspiring you and pulling you, not pushing you all the
Yeah.
time, but pulling you as well
That's the
to
key
ensure
word.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that
Pulling.
it's
Yeah.
all heading in the right direction.
And he's also available for you when you do have challenges. I mean, I don't know if you've come across this in my early days before I opened up my own company. One of the challenges was as an employee, your boss will always tell you, "Hey, listen, my door is always open. Come and talk to me anytime." I actually tried that a few times, but they're rushing out for a meeting, they're too busy, they're on a phone call, and I'm going like, oh, forget it. It's just too difficult to get them. So I'm kind of like, I'll stumble on myself and try and make it work. But see, at least I had the drive to try and try and try and try again. There are people who'll try one or two times and just give up. And that's where the execution falls off. They learn lot, that's overload of information. They learn a lot. We actually get them to practice it in class because we're worried people will walk away from the class with a lot of knowledge but not be able to use it. So we try and give them as much practice as possible. Even then, when you're actually out in the real marketplace and you use the skill, if it works, fantastic. It encourages you to continue using. If it doesn't work, where do I go? So I can't call Raju. He's in Hong Kong. I'm in Dubai. So let me ask my boss. And your boss says, "Oh, didn't you learn that in class already?" So it kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? So that's why we encourage them to have this reinforcement method internally, because they really need that to stabilize and practice the skills.
Well, it's having that growth mindset and having that idea that you don't actually have all the answers sometimes, and you actually need to just
No,
keep trying and trying, and you learn by, what do you call it, failure or lessons. You're learning.
trial and error. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
trial